The imperial world of Veora spun in silence beneath a pale sun, a jewel of authority in the Galactic Empire's crown. Ornate towers pierced the sky, humming with the quiet throb of dominion. At the heart of it all, in the marble expanse of the Grand Tribunal, a lone figure was dragged forward, leaving a trail of blood that no one cared to acknowledge. She was young, barely more than a girl. Human. Shackles clamped at her wrists, shoulders squared in a posture that made the assembled court of alien dignitaries bristle. They were used to fear, to begging, to the quivering acknowledgement of their supremacy. What they found instead in her was something far less convenient. Defiance. The presiding arbiter, an angular creature with silver chitin plates where a face might have been, clicked his mandibles and spoke without ceremony. Her list of offenses scrolled through the air above him, an endless parade of violations against imperial law. None of it mattered. Her true crime was simpler. She had existed where she was not permitted. The girl's gaze moved not to the scrolling accusations, nor to the tribunal, but to the sky glimpsed through the open roof, where faint stars still clung to the horizon. A trace of a smile crossed her lips, small enough to miss if you weren't looking. The execution order came without discussion. Her final words, barely a breath, slipped from bloodied lips. "You're too late." The energy bolt struck her chest, a heartbeat later, and her body crumpled silently against the polished floor. The spectators turned away with the indifferent efficiency of those accustomed to swift judgments. The arbiter tapped a claw against his podium, signaling for the attendants to clear the remains. At that exact moment, the first signal pierced. Veora's planetary defense nets. The technicians monitoring the sky frowned, leaned closer to their consoles. Something was wrong. An unauthorized mass was breaching space near orbit, and worse, moving at impossible velocities. Readings glitched and realigned, but the data didn't improve. It grew more absurd. 2 minutes. The senior defense coordinator, a reptilian veteran of countless suppressions, barked orders. "Raise shields. Full planetary lockdown. Scramble defense fleet immediately." Veora's planetary shield, proud, impenetrable, ignited in shimmering blue arcs. Ground batteries rotated, skyward. Squadrons of sleek Imperial fighters roared into formation. Every measure honed over centuries of domination clicked into place like the locking of a vault. 2 minutes, however, was not enough. Above the tribunal, a low tremor shook the rafters, a sound like a breath being drawn by something older than the stars themselves. High above, space twisted unnaturally. Not a jump gate activation, not a warp transit. Space itself folded, like cloth pulled into an unseen fist. In the absence of ceremony, without even the common decency of a warning flare, the Terran fleet erupted into being. Thousands of vessels, black and silver, shimmered against the broken backdrop of space. No flags, no challenge signals, only the cold geometry of warships moving as if already at war. The lead vessels were unlike anything in Imperial archives, irregular, almost ugly in design, but their purpose radiated in every angle. The tribunal hall erupted in a frenzy of orders and alarms. The arbiter spun on his heel, mandibles clicking in confusion. This is a breach of treaty. Humans lack such capabilities. This is impossible. Yet, impossible or not, it was happening. From orbit, the fleet deployed. Not in clumsy waves as Imperial, doctrine prescribed, but in a chaotic scatter that no algorithm could predict. Drones unfolded from motherships, swarming in patterns that resembled random noise more than formation. Anti-ship guns across the planet locked on and fired. Energy lances burned the sky. For an instant, it seemed Veora might hold. Then the human. Technology revealed its true nature. The Terran drones, instead of shattering under Imperial fire, phased, disappearing an instant before impact, rematerializing inside the shielding arrays. Explosions flowered across the planet's defensive grid. Ground-to-space batteries turned inward and consumed themselves in friendly fire, hacked in milliseconds by algorithms far beyond Imperial comprehension. The technicians watching from their Bunkers stared as their defensive software, systems honed across entire centuries, folded under pressure in less than 30 seconds. On the Imperial flagship in orbit, the fleet commander, a Grand Admiral whose name meant unyielding in the old tongue, ordered an emergency retreat maneuver. Phase drives warmed beneath his fleet, but refused to engage. The humans had locked the system with phase inhibitors seated moments after arrival. Retreat was no longer an option. The Grand Admiral watched through the panoramic bridge windows. As his fleet's outer layers began to vanish, ships winking out of existence in precision strikes that were not strikes at all, merely the quiet dismantling of his forces by tiny invisible machines. They are not fighting to win, the Admiral realized aloud. They are fighting to erase. Back on the planet, a signal, different, alien to Imperial communication protocols, sliced through every broadcast channel. No code, no encryption, just a single visual transmission. A view of the girl's body in the tribunal, still crumpled, still cooling. Across every Imperial screen, words scrawled themselves in bright, burning human standard. You killed one of ours. Now you answer to. All of us. The Arbiter recoiled as if struck. The gallery of minor lords and officers murmured in alarm. Protocols flickered through their minds. Negotiation, threats, bargaining. But nothing about this moment matched the operating manual of Empire. Vayora's atmosphere began to churn visibly. Human descent craft, silent black needles fell like rain through the failing shield. They did not aim for military targets alone. Governmental spires, industrial hubs, research centers, each pinpointed with devastating efficiency. The Empire had always taught that order was strength, that humans were a blight of chaos to be pruned. Yet now, facing this orchestrated fury, they understood too late. Chaos was merely order they could not comprehend. In the tribunal, a new tremor shook the polished floor. Dust sifted from the towering murals depicting centuries of conquest. The high windows, once proud displays of architectural mastery, cracked and exploded inward under the pressure of sonic booms. A human figure stood in the breach, armor matty and battle-worn, a rifle slung casually across one shoulder. Helmeted, unreadable, the tribunal guards raised their weapons, hands trembling. The figure didn't fire. Instead, it pulled a small, palm-sized device from its belt and dropped it onto the floor. A simple projector activated, casting a three-dimensional image into the center of the room. The girl, alive, recorded mere hours earlier. She laughed in the recording, vibrant, defiant, unbroken. The voice of a Terran commander, gravel-throated, almost amused, followed. Every one of our dead is a star you just darkened. Keep counting. The hologram ended. The device self-immolated with a sharp hiss. The tribunal guards, trained their entire lives never to retreat, faltered. In orbit, the Imperial fleet's core command ship, a vessel the size of a small moon, shuddered as something monstrous and invisible tore through its reinforced hull. The Grand Admiral, staring at the growing crack snaking across his bridge viewport, understood too late that his forces were not merely being defeated. They were being dismantled, their very presence rendered void. Below, on Vayora's surface, the skies burned white. Imperial transmissions, once the iron pulse of dominion across the stars, dissolved into static and panic. Messages overlapped and distorted. Shields failing at ground teams overwhelmed, requesting phase reinforcement. Systems breach, total collapse. The Arbiter staggered from the collapsing tribunal hall into the courtyard beyond, only to find the city skyline buckling. Energy towers imploded in slow, agonizing sequences. Residential blocks, government halls, ceremonial plazas, all collapsing into ash and glass under the weight of human retaliation. He turned skyward as another wave of Terran descent craft pierced the atmosphere. They came not as conquerors, but as executioners. The realization settled in his chest with a weight greater than any gravity. The Empire had killed a girl, and now an entire species had come to collect the debt. As the Arbiter fell to his knees, shielding what passed for his eyes from the blinding light, A final thought surfaced from the primal depths of his mind. A thought no member of the Imperial hierarchy had allowed themselves in centuries. Fear. Above him, the sky tore open wider, and the darkness behind the stars rushed to claim the throne world of Veora. And this was only the beginning. The descent through Veora's failing skies was surgical. Lieutenant Commander Jack Rayner gripped the side rails of the dropship as the atmosphere streaked around them, the hull groaning against the friction. His HUD scrolled a cascade of enemy signatures, red swarming across the display like a virus. He suppressed a grim smile. That kind of lopsided opposition used to bother him. Now it just meant the mission would be quick. Across from him, Sergeant Mason Wick Calloway ran a final systems check on his kinetic gauntlets, knuckles sparking faintly. Calloway had been with Rayner since the first retaliations, since the early days when humanity still thought diplomacy had a chance. They both knew better now. "Think they'll surrender this time?" Wick asked, voice crackling through the squad's private channel. Rayner tilted his head slightly, studying the projected mission brief one more time. "Doesn't matter." The dropship rocked as it passed through the outer shield lattice. What remained of it? An automated voice announced, "Final descent in 20 seconds. Below, the city sprawled in ruin. The Imperial towers that once pierced the clouds now crumbling like wet sand. Fleet Command's orders had been simple. Extract high-value Imperial Command figures for trial. Leave the rest to the Black Site engineers." The Tribunal's core leadership, if still alive, had a slim chance to learn what human justice meant. Slim. The dropship doors exploded outward, and the squad moved as one, falling into the chaos. Urban warfare had once been a tangled, grinding affair. Not anymore. The Terrans moved with cold efficiency, enhanced by micro-AI tacticians riding every decision. Rayner's boots hit cracked marble. He swept his rifle across the smoldering plaza, tagging Imperial guards scrambling for cover. His squad needed no orders. Targets dropped, each shot placed with mechanical precision. A reminder, in case the Empire had forgotten, that humans had turned war into something more than survival. They had turned it into art. Across the courtyard, a figure stumbled from the collapsing tribunal. Arbiter Vrylock himself, stripped of his ornate judiciary armor, now little more than a fugitive in his own capital. Rayner sighted him immediately. The targeting AI whispered a probability of 99.8%. Rayner moved. Vrylock, sensing something beyond his understanding, bolted into the shattered remains of a diplomatic corridor. His bodyguards attempted a last stand. Plasma. Rifles barking, but they were outmatched. Wick led the breach, dropping two with a short, brutal burst. Another crumpled under Rayner's quick shot through a seam in the guard's armor. They pursued, boots hammering against cracked stone and shattered glass. Vrylock's panicked transmissions, a shrill series of desperate coordinates, echoed off. The walls. No one answered. His empire was too busy trying to survive. Ahead, Vrylock vanished through a heavy door, locking it behind him. Rayner paused, assessing. Manual override was too slow. Time to send a message. He pulled a breach charge from his belt, slapped it onto the seam, and stepped back. The explosion was deafening. Inside, the once pristine sanctuary of the Imperial High Council lay in ruins. Monuments to alien victories loomed, twisted and broken. Vrylock cowered near a toppled dais, a jagged shard of metal clutched in one trembling hand. Rayner lowered his rifle slightly. No honor in executing a broken thing. "You're coming with us," Rayner said, voice amplified through his suits. External speakers. Vrylock hissed something guttural and lunged. A desperate, sloppy attack. Rayner sidestepped with fluid ease, catching the Arbiter by the throat with one armored hand and slamming him against the wall. The shard clattered to the floor. "You're lucky," Rayner said quietly. "Our orders were to take you breathing, not intact." Behind him, Wick secured the room, running sweeps for hidden threats. Vrylock gurgled something, mandibles twitching in defiance even now. Rayner tilted his head, studying him. This was not fearlessness. It was stubbornness, an inability to process a reality in which they were not supreme. Pathetic. Outside, the tide of battle shifted again. The remaining Imperial defenders began to collapse inward, forming desperate clusters around key extraction points. The Terran fleet, operating in perfect decentralized formation, adapted instantly. Gunships strafed entrenched positions, phase shells detonating with cold finality. Raynor glanced skyward as a ripple passed overhead. One of the human heavy carriers executing a low orbit burn, its gravity disruptors distorting the very air. Extraction. Window in 2 minutes, Wick called over the comms. Raynor tightened his grip on Vrylock. Then let's not keep the captain waiting. They moved fast and brutal, cutting a line through the crumbling remains of Vayora's seat of power. Civilians, if any remained, stayed hidden. The Tribunal's elite guard threw themselves at the Terrans in suicide charges, driven more by indoctrination than strategy. It didn't matter. They fell just the same. Through it all, Vrylock struggled, spitting broken Imperial oaths. They will come for you, he rasped through cracked mandibles. The Empire is infinite. You are nothing. Raynor didn't bother responding. Words. From an empire that had slaughtered a girl to make a point no longer mattered. Only actions did. Their evac ship arrived with a roar of thrusters, cutting a landing zone into the rubble. Raynor half-dragged, half-shoved Vrylock up the ramp as Wick covered their rear. As the ramp sealed, Vayora's skyline shuddered again, a chain of detonations walking across the horizon. Distant flashes illuminated the clouds like the heartbeat of a dying god. In the cabin, medics in black armor secured Vrylock, jabbing him with inhibitors to suppress his more exotic biological tricks. His resistance faded to trembling silence. Raynor dropped into a seat opposite him, helmet hissing as he disengaged the seal. His face was younger than Vrylock had expected. Scarred, yes, but alive. Sharp-eyed. Unyielding. Name's Raynor, he said conversationally. Since nobody briefed you properly, let me catch you up. Vrylock wheezed, defiant still. You executed a civilian under Empire law. That's not unusual for you, Raynor continued, ignoring the creature's stare. But what you missed is that civilian's name was Emily Raynor, my niece. The Arbiter's mandibles clicked open, an involuntary gesture of shock. Yeah, Raynor said softly, a dangerous smile ghosting across his mouth. Now it's personal. The ship jerked as it cleared Vayora's outer atmosphere, heading toward the waiting Terran armada. Raynor leaned back, watching Vrylock struggle to understand the scope of his failure. You think you're infinite? Raynor said, almost curious. But you made one mistake no empire survives. Vrylock shuddered, breath rattling. You taught the wrong species how to hate properly. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Far ahead, beyond even the reach of Vayora's gravwell, the Terran fleet was repositioning. Human ships, larger than anything the Empire had yet witnessed, hung against the black. Not aggressive, not posturing, simply waiting. Because this was not about conquest. This was about message. And the Empire had yet to truly understand what kind of message humanity had chosen to deliver. Raynor keyed his personal comms. Command, package secured. Ready for primary phase. A voice, dry and composed, answered almost immediately. Acknowledged. Proceed. As the dropship docked with a massive carrier, black hull marked only with the Terran emblem, a single burning star, Raynor rose. He gave Vrylock a final glance, as if studying an artifact already catalogued. This is your last ride, he said. Might want to enjoy the view. The Arbiter did not answer. There was no answer left to give. The docking clamps engaged with a heavy thud. Beyond the bulkhead, thousands of Terran soldiers, engineers, strategists, and tacticians prepared for the next phase. Vrylock would live just long enough to witness the beginning of the end. And far beyond Vayora, across the tendrils of the once unstoppable Galactic Empire, the ripples had already begun. Governors whispering about evacuation plans, fleet admirals questioning the unbreakable supremacy of their doctrine, civilizations wondering if perhaps they were not the apex predators after all. The Terran fleet had not come to negotiate, to demand tribute, or even to occupy. They had come to prove a point, and in the black between the stars, the galaxy began, for the first time in living memory, to feel something new and terrible blooming in its collective mind. Doubt, the kind that festers, the kind that eats empires from the inside out, and this was only the second blow. The interrogation chamber was colder than protocol demanded, deliberately so, not to discomfort the prisoner, that was irrelevant, but to set a tone, precision, detachment, inevitability. Raynor stood before the observation glass, arms folded, studying Vrylok's slumped figure through the polarized shield. Even shackled and dosed with neural suppressants, the creature's arrogance clung to him like a second skin. It would crack. They always cracked. Beside him, Commander Elias Ward, liaison to Terran intelligence, scrolled through a dossier on a slim console. Ward's presence meant the stakes had shifted again. He was not a soldier, not in the conventional sense. Ward specialized in endings, the kind empires didn't recover from. You know why he's still alive? Ward asked without looking up. Officially? Tribunal testimony unofficially? You want him to broadcast surrender. Ward allowed a ghost of a smile. Broadcasts are too blunt. We want him to choose it. Beg for it. Raynor said nothing. There was nothing to say. Vrylok's fate was not justice, it was architecture. A calculated demolition of faith in the Empire's inevitability. He recognizes you, Ward said, shifting the console to show an intercepted burst transmission. Vrylok's voice, thin and broken, repeating Raynor's name over and over in disbelief. A former arbiter, reduced to whispering the name of the man who had brought down his world. He'll recognize a lot more before this is done, Raynor said. The chamber lights dimmed by a fraction. A cue. It was time. Raynor entered the room alone, the door sealing with a hiss behind him. The cold bit through his armor. He liked it. It made the air sharp, every breath a choice. Vrylok stirred at the sound but did not lift his head. The defiance was fraying at the edges. Raynor crossed to the table, dropping a data slate in front of him, with a clatter that echoed through the sterile room. Congratulations, Raynor said, voice casual. You're famous. Vrylok raised his gaze slowly, hatred burning behind it. Raynor tapped the data slate, activating a series of holographic projections. Images of Veora's fall, the last transmissions of Imperial warships burning in orbit, the declarations of independence flooding in from former tributary worlds. You didn't just lose a battle, Raynor said. You lost the myth. Vrylok rasped something low, the translator struggling to catch the nuance. Raynor leaned closer. What was that? He asked lightly. You think you have broken us, Vrylok said, voice thick with disdain. You have broken nothing. Raynor smiled without warmth. Good. Keep thinking that. Makes the next part easier. He keyed another sequence. The projections shifted, now showing Imperial commanders, some pleading, some raging, begging for terms they once swore they would never need. Whole fleets switching allegiance. Colonies once proud to be subjugated, now raising human banners. This is what you don't understand, Raynor said. You never did. We don't conquer. We don't rule. We remind. Vrylok's mandibles clicked in anger. Raynor leaned in closer. We remind every species in the galaxy what it means to fight for your own. Not for conquest, not for titles, for home. Vrylok recoiled as if struck, the truth hitting deeper than any weapon. Across the observation glass, Ward watched, expression unreadable. To him, this was a mathematical certainty. Psychological collapse measured in predictable increments. Yet, he allowed himself a sliver of appreciation for Raynor's technique. It wasn't cruelty. It was inevitability shaped into a human voice. Inside the chamber, Raynor straightened, his presence filling the space without shouting or threat. Here's the offer, he said. You go on record. Admit the Empire's crimes, denounce the tribunal publicly, you live. Quiet cell, off the grid. No war crimes trial. Vrylok's breathing quickened. He understood what Raynor offered. Not mercy, an erasure, a footnote, instead of a martyr. If you refuse, Rayner continued, voice like a steel trap closing, we release the documents anyway. Everything your tribunal buried. Genocides, breeding programs, planetary purges. Every secret, Vrylock hissed, voice trembling with rage. Lies. Rayner tapped the slate again. A cascade of Imperial documents scrolled past, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. We don't need you to believe it, Rayner said. We just need everyone else to see it. Silence fell, thick and smothering. Vrylock stared at the holographic evidence, a creature watching the tides of his universe reverse and drag him out to sea. We can't stop the collapse once it starts, Rayner said, softer now. You can either ride the fall quietly or you can make it spectacular. Your choice. Minutes stretched, tension winding tighter. Finally, Vrylock sagged, the last ember of defiance guttering out. Not a broken thing. A man aware he was obsolete, hollowed by inevitability. Rayner rose, signaling the guards. As Vrylock was led away for final processing, Ward stepped into the chamber. Well executed, he said simply. Doesn't feel like victory, Rayner muttered. Ward studied him for a long moment. That's why it is. They exited together into the carrier's command corridor, a nerve center of human ingenuity. Banks of analysts coordinated strike teams, intercepted transmissions, manipulated information flows. The fall of Veora was just the opening salvo. The psychological warfare was only beginning. A junior officer approached, breathless. Sir, we've intercepted high-priority chatter from the Ryloxian frontier. Ward took the datapad, scanning quickly. His expression sharpened. They're pulling fleets from the core worlds, he said. Rayner frowned. That's desperation. Ward nodded. Desperation we can use. Already protocols were spinning up. Strike plans updated in real time. Psychological profiles recalibrated. Every move the Empire made now widened the cracks. Ward glanced at Rayner. You're being reassigned. Task Force Helios. Rayner stiffened. Helios was no ordinary unit. It operated beyond fleet command, beyond terrestrial law. Their missions were the sharpest scalpel and the bluntest hammer where needed. What's the target? Rayner asked. Ward handed him a secure drive. The heart of the Empire. No elaborate explanations. No justifications. The heart. The place even the highest echelons of Imperial command considered untouchable. They'll expect it, Rayner said, sliding the drive into a port on his wrist unit. They expect everything, Ward said, tone dry. That's why they'll lose. Rayner understood. It wasn't about tactics anymore, it was about myth-making, about reaching into the soul of a dying empire and ripping out the lie it had wrapped itself around for millennia. He strode toward the staging decks, a man on fire from the inside out. Around him, the carrier's massive hangar bays pulsed with life. Dropships rearmed, fighter squadrons refueled. Engineers sprinted across gantries, preparing for a campaign that would redraw the galaxy's borders forever. Rayner moved through it all like a fixed point, immune to the chaos. His team would already be assembling. Men who understood the weight of what they carried. Men who no longer fought for survival alone, but for something far more dangerous. Revenge. No orders would be questioned. No objectives would be too sacred. The Empire would learn that Earth's fury was not a wave to resist. It was the tide that drowned worlds. As Rayner stepped onto the gunship that would carry him to the staging zone, he allowed himself a rare moment of memory. Emily's laughter, bright and unbreakable. The way she had believed, truly believed, that better was always possible. He carried that with him now. Not her death, her defiance, because the Empire had made one critical mistake. They had given humanity nothing left to lose. And men with nothing left to lose were gods in the making. The gunship's engines roared to life, lifting off into the dark. Far ahead, unseen but inevitable, the heart of the Empire beat its last fragile rhythms, unaware that the blade was already descending. And Rayner, last of his family, first of a new war, sharpened the edge with every breath he took. The citadel of Veloris was not built to be taken. It was constructed as a statement, a monument to the Empire's certainty that no force in the galaxy could breach its walls. Layer upon layer of defensive grids, kinetic barriers, antimatter, fields and fleets standing sentinel across every conceivable approach. Every stone, every line of code screamed of supremacy. Rayner stood aboard the infiltration cruiser, silent as final checks were completed. Around him, Task Force Helios prepared without ceremony. No rousing speeches, no declarations of glory. Every man aboard knew what was at stake and what was required. The heart of the Empire was not just a fortress. It was a belief system, etched into reality. To tear it down was not simply a matter of weapons. It was a matter of will. A tremor rolled through the ship as the stealth drives engaged, slipping them beneath the Empire's sensors like a ghost through a battlefield. Outside, the swirling maelstrom of the Empire's fleet loomed, vast and intricate, but they moved unseen, the culmination of decades of human ingenuity born of desperation and loss. Rayner keyed the mission briefing one last time, though every detail was already burned into his mind. 3 primary objectives: breach the Citadel's inner sanctum, seize control of the communications nexus, and transmit the compiled evidence of the Empire's crimes to every corner of the known galaxy. A simple plan, deceptively so. Simple. Plans survived contact. Complicated ones became tombstones. The cruiser slipped past the outer defenses with surgical precision, threading through gaps only a human mind could perceive. AI had no place here. It lacked the raw, reckless intuition necessary to bet everything on a half-second window between sensor sweeps. Inside the Citadel, chaos was already blooming. Rayner's teams had seeded misinformation weeks earlier, manipulating the security. Protocols, misaligning command structures, breeding confusion within the Empire's own ranks. By the time the cruiser docked, alarms were blaring, but no one knew why or where to focus their response. Rayner and his team disembarked with brutal efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Their armor absorbed the kinetic energy of small arms. Fire, their weapons calibrated to disable first, destroy second. They moved like inevitability incarnate, a force the Empire could neither predict nor counter. Corridors twisted in impossible geometries designed to disorient attackers. Rayner's HUD flickered with navigation overlays, but he ignored them. The human brain had evolved for chaos. The Empire had built perfection, and perfection was brittle. He trusted his instincts, leading the team deeper, past automated kill zones and panic-stricken guards firing wildly into empty halls. At the Nexus threshold, they encountered the first real resistance. Praetorian units, bred and augmented specifically for this moment. Towering figures clad in living metal, wielding weapons that sang of annihilation. Rayner didn't flinch. He moved. The fight was savage, brief, precision over brute strength. The Praetorians had been designed to face armies. They could not adapt to the surgical fury of men who had learned, over centuries of war and betrayal, that survival was an art of making yourself the weapon. The last of the Praetorians fell with a shudder that echoed through the Citadel's bones. Rayner stepped over the body, his mind already ahead, calculating the next breach. They reached the Nexus, a massive chamber of crystal and alloy, its core pulsing with the collected knowledge and propaganda of the Empire's reign. Here was the mouthpiece through which the Empire had shaped reality itself, twisting facts into monuments, erasing atrocities into glories. Ward's voice crackled through Rayner's comms. Timers started. You've got 20 minutes before they reroute the security systems. Rayner acknowledged, planting the encryption spike into the central console. A pulse of energy shuddered through the room as human code invaded Imperial systems, carving paths where no alien algorithm could survive. On the main display, images flickered, atrocities hidden for generations, planets razed for speaking against tribute quotas, entire species sterilized for resisting genetic compliance mandates, secret tribunals ordering annihilations under the pretense of quarantine. Rayner watched it all unfold, not with triumph but with a cold, grim satisfaction. This was not vengeance. This was the truth weaponized. Transmission pathways blossomed like veins across the stars. Embassies, trading hubs, colony ships, even Imperial command centers. No screen would be untouched. No citizen would remain ignorant. The Empire would drown in the blood it had so meticulously hidden. Movement flickered at the chamber's edge. Raynor whirled, weapon raised. High Chancellor Oryx, the so-called voice of the tribunal, emerged, flanked by a cadre of elite guards. His armor was ceremonial, gilded, and impractical, a relic of pageantry now rendered laughable. "You cannot imagine what you are undoing," Oryx said, voice trembling with fury. Raynor didn't lower his weapon. "Undoing? No, you built a lie so large you thought it was the universe itself. We're just turning on the lights," Oryx sneered, signaling his guards forward. The fight was brutal. No rules, no quarter. Helios fought like men who understood there was no fallback, no surrender, no survival without victory. Each movement honed, each shot placed with lethal intent. They weren't fighting for territory. They were fighting to carve a new reality from the corpse of the old. Raynor faced Oryx directly, the two circling like apex predators. Oryx moved with surprising speed, his strikes fueled by desperation rather than discipline. Raynor weathered the assault, finding the openings, exploiting the weaknesses. It was never a question of whether Oryx would fall, only how long he could pretend otherwise. The final blow came swift and merciless. Raynor disarmed him with a brutal twist, slamming him against the Nexus console. Oryx gasped, the fight leaving him in a shuddering wave. "You think they'll follow you?" Oryx spat, blood staining his lips. "Without order, they will tear themselves apart." Raynor pressed closer, voice low. "Good. If they can't build something better, they don't deserve to survive." He left Oryx crumpled there, a discarded relic of a dead age. The transmission hit critical mass. Across the stars, a billion screens flickered with the truths the Empire had buried. Screams, cries, chaos, but also something else. Silence. The silence of realization, of lies falling like ash in the wind. Ward's voice cut. "You pull out, it's done." Raynor hesitated only a fraction of a second, memorizing the moment. Then he turned, leading Helios through the collapsing corridors. The Citadel crumbling from within as automated fail-safes triggered in futile rage. The extraction point was a gauntlet. Imperial loyalists scrambling to contain what could no longer be contained. But it didn't matter. Helios moved with the terrible certainty of men who knew history had already shifted. The cruiser lifted off just as the Citadel's inner reactor destabilized. A final, impotent death throw. From orbit, it was almost beautiful. The heart of an empire burning out against the cold dark. Inside the cruiser, Raynor stripped off his helmet, the recycled air tasting sharper than any battlefield. Ward stood at the command deck, watching. The feeds pour in. Riots, coups, mutinies. Worlds throwing down Imperial banners and raising their own. "You did it," Ward said. Raynor shook his head. "We started it." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Finally, Ward asked, "What now?" Raynor looked out the viewport, the shattered remains of the Citadel drifting like bones. "Now," he said, "we build something that deserves to survive." The words hung heavy, not as a declaration but as a promise, because Earth had not come to conquer. It had come to remind the galaxy that survival wasn't a gift. It was a choice, and humanity had chosen to fight for it with blood, fire, and a will no empire could ever extinguish. As the cruiser vanished into the dark, carrying the first architects of a new order, the galaxy turned, uncertain, raw, awake, a beginning born from the ashes of monsters, and far beyond any star chart, in places no empire had ever dared map. Other forces stirred, watching, waiting, smiling.